Vegas says the Texans-Chiefs game is going to hit 55 points. We'll give you our favorite plays and fades from that game. And stay tuned for the worst recommendation Devin has ever made on this show, right here on the Week 6 edition of the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid, presented by DraftKings. John, we're going to talk about Vegas first. Tell us what Vegas says.
Vegas value chart this week has two 3-star teams. Those are Kansas City at home against Houston, which we're just talking about, so stay tuned for some of the picks there. And Baltimore at home as a big favorite, a big home favorite against Cincinnati, who's been bleeding yardage on the ground. And yet, we'll talk about this in just a moment, but I think Mark Ingram is pretty low owned. So should you bite or should you not? After that, it's a potential shootout with the Rams, San Francisco, 51-point Vegas total. And then you have a series of away favorites. Atlanta over the Cardinals, Dallas in New York, Meadowlands area, and Houston. While they're not the favorite, they're a 4-point underdog at Kansas City, but they have a very high team total at 25.5 points. So a lot to be looking at this week. I'll start. This isn't Vegas related. This is my favorite slate of the year thus far because I think there are a lot of different ways it can go based on what we have. We've got a more limited selection of games because obviously we have Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night that's off DraftKings. Then we have an early game, I guess, being played in London, and then 4 bye teams. So you're more limited, more compressed, and I think the pricing's pretty sharp. So a lot to talk about in tonight's episode.
And I think the main slate doesn't have nearly as many injuries as we usually see, so there's maybe not quite as many of those sort of jump out at you obvious sort of plays. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Devin, I'm going to come to you first on quarterbacks. Who are you playing?
Yeah, I think the big question in cash this week is: do you play Lamar Jackson or do you play Kyler Murray or do you play Matt Ryan? And for me, it depends on the slate. So on DraftKings, I want the 300-yard bonus, and I think Matt Ryan is more likely to do that than Kyler Murray. Where on FanDuel, I want the rushing ability of Murray. So that's how I'm approaching that. But I'll let the other guys touch base a little bit on it. I think that this game is primed to be a shootout that we saw similar to last week where Houston and Atlanta, neither team could stop each other. And it was basically, if you stack that game, you won a lot of money. So both teams, I mean, Arizona's defense is a borderline disaster, as is Atlanta. So you could go in either direction there, but let's just throw it around. Who are you guys playing in cash? Are you picking from this game before I go into the deeper quarterbacks? Because I think that's ultimately the question as far as what you're doing this week.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I wrote in Trend Spotting last night that came out this morning that this is basically the beginning of the Kyler Murray blow-up. Devin made a great point. And also what lines up with what Devin said is Ryan is $100 cheaper on DraftKings, which is where you get the bonus. And Murray is cheaper on FanDuel. So that works out even better for a scoring system and pricing for what Devin said. But Murray is one of 3 quarterbacks with at least 17 DraftKings points in each of his first 5 games this year. The other 2 are Patrick Mahomes and Matt Ryan. So this game, has all the makings of a shootout. The defenses are bad. The offenses are good. But I do like Murray here in terms of GPPs because his ownership is going to be lower. And he only has a 2% touchdown rate so far this year. And I think that we're going to get some progression to the mean on that. He's going to start throwing more touchdowns. And Atlanta might be the team that allows it because they are allowing touchdowns on 65% of their red zone drives, which is the 9th worst in the NFL this year. So I think it is Murray, especially in GPPs. But in cash, they're about the same. So it's certainly a toss-up. And I do like Devin's point about the potential for the bonus with Ryan.
John, does it make you nervous at all that Atlanta is a road favorite in this one?
No, it doesn't.
No? Just making sure. They're both pretty awful.
Yeah, I mean, look at what Arizona has done from a defensive perspective. Go through 5 weeks. They've given up 23 to Cincinnati, who has no offense. They gave up 27 to Seattle. 38 to Carolina. They gave up 23 to Baltimore in a close-fought contest. And opening weekend, they gave up 27 to Detroit. So I don't have a whole lot of worry about Atlanta going on the road. Excuse me. Matt Ryan, last week, I admittedly was a little skeptical of him going to Houston, and that turned out to be a mistake. He now has 5 weeks of 300-plus passing yards, and that team is just rolling in terms of their offense. There's no reason to get off of them this week against Arizona. Patrick Peterson, this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is his last week of suspension. Maybe Arizona's defense looks a little bit different in week 7. I don't know that he'll make that much of a difference, but there's no reason to get off the train this week.
Yeah, and Devin, what do you think about this Houston-Kansas City game? It's got a crazy high total. You playing any guys from that game?
We'll get into running backs in a minute, but
Sure.
Mahomes, I'm not playing him this week. I think the ankles. I mean, we saw last week against the Colts, it wasn't 100%, and I think it was an ankle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I don't think an ankle is going to heal to 100% in a week. I'm not a doctor. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But mobility makes Patrick Mahomes for what he is, and if you're paying up at that price, I can't do it. I think Deshaun Watson's going to be popular just because people are going back to him. I'm not going that route because what we've seen is that Kansas City is anemic against the run, and people are trying to keep the ball away from this offense. So I'm fading the quarterbacks in this game. I think that there is a high point potential, but it's not the route that I'm going this week.
Yeah. Are there any other quarterbacks you want to mention there, Devin?
Funny you ask. So a couple of guys. Don't really love any of them, but Kirk Cousins is the first name that pops up for me. So Cousins is facing an Eagles defense that has been, probably Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde is the best way to describe them, in that they are probably the best run defense in football and the one of, if not the worst, pass defenses in football. So it's always scary to play Cousins just because of the lack of throwing volume, but he did throw for 300 yards last week, and he's thrown in Philly has allowed 300 yards and 2 touchdowns to every quarterback except Luke Falk. So I think Kirk Cousins is a little bit better than Luke Falk. We can all agree on that. So I think that 300 yards for Cousins is definitely of the realm of possibility. At just 7,000 on FanDuel is a nice play there. Are we doing anything with Case Keenum against Miami? So Miami's allowing 298 yards passing per game, and we've seen quarterbacks. I don't know that I'm going there, and this is not the intro to my worst pick. That is coming in the tight end section.
If you want someone that costs $5,000, just play Gardner Minshew, right? Why aren't we just doing that? So I mentioned a stat about there's 3 quarterbacks with at least 17 DraftKings points in all 5 games. There are 4 with at least 16.5. It is Mahomes, Murray, Ryan, and Gardner Minshew, who played half of week 1. So He has at least 16.5 DraftKings points in every game. He's still $5,000. So we talk about what does he have to do to get his price raised. But last week, the guy showed a ceiling too. So, if we have to spend $5,000, I'd rather with him than with Keenum, and probably even than with Cousins, although you do make a good point about the Philly funnel.
Yeah, for $200 more, you can have Kirk Cousins. Case closed.
More than Minshew. You like that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who are Minshew's receivers?
DJ
Shark. DJ Shark.
Where's it at? You thought you have props for that.
It's stuck at the port.
His receivers aren't as good, but Cousins plays on a team. He's stuck at the port. Cousins plays on a team who would pass 10 times and be happy. I know that's not unlikely to happen again, but it could.
The problem I have with Minshew is that New Orleans has looked better of the last 2 weeks. Marshawn Lattimore has got his act together after struggling for the first 3 weeks. They held Dak to 223 and no touchdowns, and Jameis to 204 with 2 touchdowns. So I think that this isn't the same unit that we saw in the first 3 weeks. I do think they're playing a little bit better. I don't know that we need to go down this low.
I don't think we have to.
We're talking about GPP here. I think we're talking about GPP.
And you mentioned
we should be clear
Keenum,
about that.
I had to say no to Case Keenum.
I was just asking the question because Miami is a stardom if you got him type defense.
Yeah, John, who are you playing at quarterback?
Can I throw one more out?
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield.
What? You said at the beginning of the year you were not going to recommend
1%
Cleveland
owned
Browns.
Again. Last time I recommended him, he was 1% owned, and he threw for 340 yards.
Okay.
The Seattle defense we saw on Thursday, it can be exposed through the pass. Jared Goff threw for 395 yards, and Andy Dalton threw for 418 and 2 against his defense. The defense is propped up a little bit because they've faced Mason Rudolph, Teddy Bridgewater, and Kyler Murray, who is running for his life. I don't have the ownership projections in front of me, but I would imagine he's sub 3% again at 50. At Mayfield is
2%.
I'm looking up his price.
He's 2.9 on DraftKings.
He's 5,500. So I think that there's a realistic chance that he throws for 300 yards again. No one will play him because of how bad that team looked on Monday night. But if I could get Mayfield for 5,500 at 3%, I'll throw a couple in a GPP. All
right, John. Quarterbacks.
I don't even know how to follow this up. With the quarterbacks that you guys are talking about, you're making it too easy here to look good. Matt Ryan, Arizona, cash. I think he's the primary option. I think you can look at Lamar Jackson playing at home against Cincinnati at 6,900, and I'm not afraid of Pat Mahomes at home against Houston. He's another quarterback that, despite as bad as he looked last week, he still threw for 300 yards for the 5th consecutive week. The issue with him, especially, and maybe even Lamar Jackson, is that there's not a lot of value on this slate. So if you go that way, you're going to have to take some chances at other positions. The question is whether or not you want to take a chance at quarterback or take a chance at wide receiver. And typically what I like to do is to go where I know the value or where I know I'm getting a return on that investment. And I think at quarterback, Mahomes is almost guaranteed for those 300 yards. So any of those three guys, I think at GPPs, I do like the Cousins call. I think Devin called that one out at 5,200. And then, you can go with either one of those quarterbacks. Did you guys even talk about the San Francisco LA Rams game? That's a potential shootout. Jared Goff, 6,100, and Jimmy Garoppolo at 5,700. I think both of those are in play, especially Garoppolo at 5,700. I think that this offense looks pretty darn good. They're doing, they're spreading the ball out. I think you can stack him with George Kittle, feel pretty good about it. And he'll go under owned because it's almost like a Philadelphia, New England type scenario where they spread the ball around so much to the receivers that nobody likes to go with Garoppolo, but he's got 300-yard upside just about every week because of the way they run their offense. And he's 5,700. I don't hate it.
And those are GPP recommendations, right? In the Rams Niners game?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, just making sure. Ryan, you got any other quarterback thoughts? Or should we go to running backs?
Nope, let's go to running backs.
All right, man. You ready for some running back stuff? I'll mention two guys we're keeping an eye on here, David Johnson and Todd Gurley. Neither one of them practiced on Thursday. There's some value there, but at the very least, watch out if you're thinking about playing them.
I don't think Gurley's going to go.
Yeah, I don't think Gurley's going to go either. And David Johnson with his back issue, I don't know. He's looking pretty iffy too. Like, I thought he was going to be a good play against Atlanta, but keep an eye on that. Ryan, tell us, what running backs do you like?
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with it. First of all, if Johnson doesn't play, I'm playing Chase Edmonds everywhere. He's 4,600, and that's the kind of relief that you need. So Chase Edmonds is kind of, my notes say lock city if Johnson is out. So that's all I really need to talk about Chase Edmonds. After that, I'm going to Devin's boy, Nick Chubb in Cleveland. So Seattle against running backs has allowed 90-plus receiving yards to running backs in 2 of their last 3 games. And they've allowed 4-plus receptions to a running back or to a tandem of running backs in 4 of their 5 games. Nick Chubb is playing all 3 downs. Devin likes Baker Mayfield instead with the goofy red illustrated Black-Eyed Joe there.
It's like Black-Eyed Jack or something.
But I mean, we've got a 3-down running back, compared to a team whose passing attack is in disarray. So in cash, I like Chubb better. I think that's the better play. I may or may not talk about some Cleveland passing game players later, but I think in cash it's Chubb. And the other one I'm thinking here is Leonard Fournette. So I know Devin's gonna flash the red.
I like Fournette better than Chubb this week.
Okay, there we go. So he is $600 cheaper, which is helpful. But I mean, the volume is just incredible with Fournette right now. The guy's playing every snap. He's doing everything, and he's still under $7,000. So there's on our IVCs. Another do-it-all running back, Le'Veon Bell, is popping up at the top of the value with 6,400, and I'd rather play Fournette at this point. With Bell, it's just all floor and no ceiling to me. Even though Sam Darnold is coming back, I'm struggling to look at him and just feel really great about plugging him in. Maybe the other guys can talk me into it. And then just one other that I wanted to talk about here is Chris Carson. So there was a fumble trouble narrative with Chris Carson. That's gone. He has 49 carries in his last 2 games, and he's played 76% and 84% of the snaps in the last 2 games. So he's back to being the all everything, catching passes, running the ball back for Seattle, and I like that in the game against Cleveland.
Nice. Devin, you did not like the Nick Chubb call here. Is this just because you think Cleveland's going to be passing in this game?
Well, so here's the problem with Chubb is that Seattle's defense has faced a top 10 running back in every game this year. So from 2018. So in 2018, they faced top 10 fantasy running back in every game so far this season. They faced Todd Gurley, David Johnson, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, and Joe Mixon, which is just like a gauntlet of running backs that they've faced. And they're only allowing 43 yards per game and just 3.6 yards per carry. So I can't get behind it because Nick Chubb, to me, doesn't possess the 6 or 7 catch upside that I think you're going to need against this Seattle defense. I think that it's a play that I 100% agree with Ryan on Chris Carson. He's my top guy this week because this Cleveland run defense is horrendous. I mean, we all saw it on Monday with Christian Kirksey out for the year and Larry Ogunjobi and Sheldon Richardson struggling up front. I think that Chris Carson is in a big spot this week, but Chubb, I just can't get behind it. But if he can catch passes, to your point, Seattle has definitely had issues stopping the running backs out of the backfield. Going down, I'm going back to where I was last week, and that's going back to Carlos Hyde. So I mentioned him last week. I got torn up in the comments, and what did he do? 66 yards and a touchdown. And he had a negative 15-yard fluke run that was a fumble that they recovered. So really, if you take that out, he's at 80 yards and a touchdown at 4.4K, and he's going up against – can we agree that Kansas City might have the worst run defense in the league? I think we've been talking about it since week 2.
You have, and I'm starting to get on board.
Even when Josh Jacobs in a blowout, like it's a scenario in which they've allowed 60 yards or more to every running back that they've faced and 99 yards or more to 4 of the 5 running backs that they've faced this year. So it's a prime spot for Carlos Hyde this week. I don't necessarily like Duke Johnson just because laterally they're better than they are up the middle. Now, if it's a blowout, that completely changes things. But Hyde is productive. He's not the same. He seems to be the guy that we saw in San Francisco more than the guy we saw in Cleveland and Jacksonville and getting cut in Kansas City. And there's a little revenge narrative that he's going up against the team that cut him. So he's cash game viable for me. He's a guy who I think you could save a lot of salary this week with. And I think he's going to put up a similar performance of 60, 70 yards and finding the end zone at least once.
John was rolling his eyes a lot during this part of the show. John, tell us more.
Have we looked at the stat lines for Carlos Hyde? Outside of week 1 where he looked pretty good against New Orleans, 10 carries for 80 some yards. After that, he's been a model of inefficiency. He averaged less than I'll even give you week 2, 20 carries for 90 yards in week 2. But since then, 10 for 19, 12 for 58, and 21 for 60. Just doing some rough math in my head. That's 22. That's 40 carries for 130 yards over the past 3 weeks against defenses that I'm looking at are not very good. I don't know. I mean, if they fall behind by 2 touchdowns here, is it going to be Carlos Hyde getting the work, or is it going to be Duke Johnson? I know that they've been in games over the past pretty much the entire season. If they fall behind by 2 touchdowns, it's not going to be Carlos Hyde on the field. It's going to be Duke Johnson.
But let's not talk too much about Carlos Hyde. I want to hear more, John, about some of the guys you do like this week.
Well, it's a rough position this week, So I said I love that.
Which is why I'm looking at Carlos Hyde.
Yes, I mean, so I'll grant you that. I will give you that.
He's the best sub 5K guy, unless Chase Edmonds is the starter.
There's not a 5K guy on my cash game list, so exactly. I'll grant you that. I do think, despite what Ryan said, I think that Le'Veon Bell is squarely in play this week at 6,400. I think the offense. It's a different offense in New York. That game started off as the Cowboys 9-point away favorites. It's down to about a touchdown now, which is a pretty significant move in the NFL in terms of line movements. And shout out to Morrow and Austin on their normalized strength of schedule tool. The Cowboys are the 3rd worst defense to running backs. To this point in the season, allowing 32% more points to this position normalized against the league average opponent. So I think that Le'Veon Bell should be squarely in play at 6,400. Agree with the Fournette calls and the Carson calls. Those are all cash game plays for me. In terms of GPP plays, I led off. I kind of teased this a little bit when we were talking about Vegas value chart. Baltimore is an 11-point favorite against Cincinnati. I just talked about normalized strength of schedule. Dallas, the 3rd worst team. The 2nd worst team is Cincinnati, and they go up against Mark Ingram, who I think pulled up quickly, is coming off of a week where he touched the ball 21 times. He's a guy that I think if they get out front, they're just going to feed him with quite a bit of carries. And I think he'll go under-owned. Looking at Buzzard's ownership projections, he's about 9% on Thursday night. We'll see how that goes into the weekend, but I think he's a reasonable GPP candidate because he is priced up a little bit on DraftKings at 6,600, but I think he brings 100-yard upside with multiple touchdowns in that matchup. Kamara is somebody who nobody's going to touch this weekend because he's $8,000, and as of today, there's not a whole lot of value elsewhere. But I like his matchup against Jacksonville. He's $8,000, so it's going to cost you. But I think he's a guy that is going to go under-owned in tournaments. And the last one, Joe Mixon, in that same game against Baltimore. Baltimore has not done a whole lot against running backs this season, trying to pull it up on the fly. Last week, maybe they contained James Conner, but did they really? Because they had Ryan Hester at quarterback throughout most of that game. And then before that, Nick Chubb ran for what?
I'm no Devlin Hodges.
Well, hopefully somebody from the talent division is watching I'm putting something in for you. Let's get Hester in there. The week prior, Nick Chubb just blasted that defense. In fact, the Browns in general did. Even Hilliard got a touchdown. Rush for almost 200 yards against that defense. And I think that Joe Mixon is a guy that we can definitely count on or at least consider for GPP contests.
What are we doing about Malcolm Brown if Gurley misses?
You're playing him. You're playing him. Why wouldn't you?
I mean, in that game, you pretty much
But he's
have
4,300.
Right?
He's the same price as Carlos Hyde.
Yeah.
That's
a good call.
I'd play Brown.
I'd play. What about Henderson in a GPP?
The guy's 2 snaps all year.
I know.
That's a little
Brown
fancy.
is like a plotter, right? So he's just going to run straight. At 3,200, you could make a pretty good lineup with.
He had as many
Henderson.
touchdowns in week 1 as Henderson has snaps all year.
Yeah, they've got 3 receivers who are legit, assuming they're all healthy.
Cooks isn't playing.
He's not playing.
No,
at all?
it doesn't look like Cooks is going to play.
He didn't practice, so he's still in the protocol.
Well, he was limited practice on Thursday, but yeah,
That's what I thought.
He's iffy.
Yeah,
he's iffy.
They're going to play Everett. They're going to play Everett and Higbee a lot, though, with the 2 receivers and play 12. I mean,
That's fine.
The point I was trying to make, it still stands, whether or not Cooks plays or not, is that if they get inside the 5, they're going to hand the ball off to Brown, and he's a guy that even if he has only 60 yards and he gets a pair of touchdowns, he more than meets value that you need for GPPs, especially on a week where value is limited. So he's more in play than Hyde, assuming that Gurley's inactive.
I got one more guy.
All right.
Devontae Freeman. It's sort of now or never for Freeman, right? I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
Arizona is allowing 4.8 yards per carry. They've allowed 694 yards rushing on the year, which is a lot. And I know that they're going to get continue to get Ito Smith involved, but it's sort of nobody likes Devontae Freeman, and I think for good reason, because he's disappointed so many times. But at 6,600, especially on FanDuel at 66, I think he's squarely in play, not in cash, but as a GPP play this week.
Yeah. Any other running backs you want to mention? Ryan, John?
Yeah, no. I have one more.
All right.
I do. Real quick. Damian Williams. So he came back last week. It is a 50-50 committee, but people were worried that it might be a 3-man committee because Darrell Williams was doing well without him. Darrell Williams goose-egged last week. Damian Williams is back. He had more than half the snaps. Houston's allowing 9 receptions a game to running backs. They've played a lot of pass-catching running backs, but that is the most in the league. And if you are a narrative street person, you believe in Mahomes' ankle being pretty bad, they might go more short passes, check down to the running back. And Kansas City's gaining 80% of their total yards via the pass, which is most in the NFL. So
what makes you say this is only going to augment your case, but what makes you say it was a 50-50 split going into that or in that game? I'm not seeing that in the statistics.
Well, last week the snaps were such that Damian Williams got 50 and the other guys basically got 25 each.
That's fair. Okay, I thought so.
But the production was not. The production, Darrell Williams got 0 pretty much everything, right?
Okay. Damian Williams is trash.
Damian Williams could catch 5 or 6 passes in the game and make some plays. So
I like the call.
It's a GPP play.
I like the call.
He's averaging 1.8 yards per carry. So John talking about Carlos Hyde's lack of production.
Yeah,
PPR. And he's liking a guy who has 1.8 yards per carry.
A target
hypocritical there. I mean,
a target in PPR leagues is worth 2.5 times as much as a carry. So.
Okay. Speaking of comparing weird, sort of lesser owned running backs, what happened to this bet that you and Ryan had last week? It didn't happen. Like there was no head shaving.
Did you see my head shaved?
No. All right. Okay. Just checking.
We each got a haircut since we never agreed to terms.
Wow.
I was ready to shave my head, but I really wasn't worried about losing. So
I was worried about shaving my head more than losing.
Well, the viewers would want to know, so I figured I'd ask. All right. Please use the YouTube comments to tell us which of these picks you like and dislike. And please subscribe, hit that little bell. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers on our channel. We're like 300 short. If we can get those 300 other subscribers, we're going to have another big contest, but bigger this time. So please subscribe. Yes.
And give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I don't care. It's the same thing.
Thumbs down for Devin.
Yeah, thumbs down for Devin, thumbs up for the 3 of us. All right, let's talk about wide receivers. We mentioned Brandon Cooks is a little iffy, limited practice Thursday, still in concussion protocol. It looks like Sammy Watkins is not going to go this week. He did not practice on Thursday. And Tyreek Hill might be coming back this week. He got in a full practice on Thursday. I don't know if that impacts the flow of that game, or John, maybe it impacts your pick or like of Mahomes at all there. Let's go to you, John, first and talk about wide receivers.
So here's a disclaimer. I hate this position this week.
Nice.
As of Thursday night. Now I always say that check out my article on Saturday when it comes out. I will give you my final thoughts on everything. But as of Thursday night, I'm really struggling with this And maybe that doesn't sell likes and subscriptions to the channel, but I'm at least being honest. The players I have in cash on Thursday night are, Courtland Sutton against Tennessee. He's turning out to be a legitimate NFL receiver. He's only $5,000 against Tennessee. Like the call, like the player there. I like the matchup as well. I like Larry Fitzgerald against Atlanta. I think the personnel matchup there is stellar. Kyler Murray continues to go to him. He's leaning on the future Hall of Famer. It makes a lot of sense why he would. And so I think that he's fine at 6,100. And then I'll save some of my GPP picks and let the other guys go, but I'll close out with the last cash game guy I have, again, on Thursday night. Devin, what do you think about Jarvis Landry against Seattle? I think at 5,200, it looks like they're starting to integrate him a little more into the offense as the season moves on. I think rightfully so. He's possession receiver, full PPR. He looks like a good call. Again, I reserve judgment until Saturday, but as of tonight, he's on my cash game list for this weekend.
Nice. Devin, who you got at wide receiver?
Yeah, Jarvis Landry is my top guy this week. The game plan to stop this Browns defense in the narrative is that Baker Mayfield is a one-read quarterback. And so what they're doing is they're double or triple teaming Odell Beckham to take him out of the game, thinking that a majority of the plays is going to be the first read, and Mayfield has a problem checking down to other receivers. So they're designing plays to go to Landry, which is why we've seen over the last two games, he has 12 catches for 242 yards. So I think at his price, he's another guy that should have seen an increase. We see these Monday night players who have a decent game that just don't, because the pricing is already out, don't get that price increase.
And he seems to be more favorably priced at DraftKings than at FanDuel.
Correct. My second favorite guy is Mohamed Sanu. So Sanu in cash is another guy who just, for whatever reason, his price doesn't increase. And on DraftKings at 4,500, he's basically been extremely consistent. So he's had 6 for 75, 9 for 91, and 5 for 42, but did score a touchdown last week. So he's integrating to really becoming a consistent number two. With Calvin Ridley kind of being up and down this year, and Julio having a bit of a down year. So I think that in what a game that we think should be a shootout, he's definitely firmly in play. Going a little bit deeper, I do like – I'm trying to figure out which – Vikings receiver I want to play. I think in cash on DraftKings, Adam Thielen at 6,700 is firmly in play. Stephon Diggs, there's something going on there. I'm not going to touch on it. He wants a trade, but it seems to be a bit disconnected. Thielen seems to be the clear number one there. Going up against an Eagles defense, I mentioned Kirk Cousins earlier. 6,700, I think that you can easily fit him in. He's a guy in cash that I would have no issue playing.
It sounds like both Devin and John are finding a little bit of salary relief at this position compared to maybe some of the other plays, unless those running backs are injured and come out. But Ryan, are you paying up for anybody at receiver this week?
Here comes Julio Jones.
No, nobody at the top. Isn't
it? It was the setup. I was lobbing it up there.
I'm disagreeing with Devin's always or never on Julio because I'm just wavering. I mean, it's ironic that he started this year scoring touchdowns finally, and now he's cooled off. And it's also
doesn't
ironic,
that make my case for always or never?
I guess so. And it's also ironic that Julio or that Atlanta's passing more than any team in the league, and he is not really producing in the last couple of weeks. Like between Julio and DeAndre Hopkins, the explosion is due to happen. I just don't think I can pay for it this week. The guys I like the best are more mid-range guys. So one of them is Tyler Boyd, who in 5 games this year, he does have the one stinker where the entire offense was terrible on Monday night in Pittsburgh, but he has 2 games with 6 receptions and 60 or more yards. He has 2 other games with 10 receptions and 120 or more yards. And Cincinnati passes the ball on 66% of their neutral script plays, which is the 3rd highest in the league. teams pass against Baltimore 64% of that same situation, which is the sixth highest percentage in the league. We know where the targets are going. We know since he's passing. So I like Tyler Boyd, especially in cash, where he seems to be pretty safe. But I also think there's upside here, particularly in garbage time, kind of like there was last week for Cincinnati. The other one I like, speaking of consistency, is Cooper Kupp. So 29% of Rams targets are going to Cooper Kupp, second highest target share on his team in the entire NFL. He's been a wide receiver 1 in each of the last 3 weeks. He leads all wide receivers in targets. He's the overall wide receiver 3. Seemingly doesn't get enough people talking about him and doesn't get priced among elite wide receivers, especially in a week where the Rams may not have 3 wide receivers on the field at all times, which makes them usually harder to predict. He might be easier to predict this week. So I like Cooper Kupp. I like Tyler Boyd. Which is why I'm struggling. You might have seen the red guy here when John said he hates wide receivers this week, but I'm struggling way more at running back. I see more receivers I want to play than running backs. And the other one here that I didn't see mentioned, and maybe because he may not even play due to an ankle injury because he didn't play last week, is Christian Kirk. But Atlanta is allowing 197 yards a game to wide receivers this year, so that's the 4th most in the league. And Kirk was almost as targeted, almost as productive as Fitzgerald in the first few games for Arizona when he was healthy. Steve had him at 3% earlier today. I can't imagine that has changed too significantly. And if there is a guy that's going to make a big play in that offense, it would be Kirk, not Fitzgerald. So I like him too, just from a GPP perspective. But wait, one more. Hold on, one more. Sorry, still here. What would we be as DFS players if we didn't go back to the chalk that burned us last week? I mentioned Tyler Boyd in cash. How about Auden Tate in GPP?
No.
Steve had him at 3% as well. He played 100% of the snaps last week. The Baltimore secondary will not have Jimmy Smith back, and they've been giving up a lot of passing yards this week.
For those of you listening to the audio version,
So,
John and Devin disagree with that pick, and John now has an even more poorly drawn version of the Black Eyed Joe.
we have 2 potential screenshots here. It's one with John's really bad Black Eyed Joe, and one with Devin with going thumbs down, dislike me. But again, when chalk burns you and the guy plays all the snaps, it's at least worth my attention, if not anyone else's on the show here today.
Terry McLaurin at 64 on FanDuel is interesting, coming back from injury against this Miami defense.
John says no.
I can't.
John
play
hates
him on
wide receivers. He already told us he hates wide receivers.
I can't play him on DraftKings at 6,000, but he gets Keenum back, and those two had a bit of an upside early on. So I think
Keenum's not throwing into Xavier Howard's defense. That's just not going to happen. Trey Quinn is the play there. If you want to play a Washington wide receiver this week, it's Trey Quinn out of the slot. And I've already established this earlier this year when Trey Quinn scored a touchdown in garbage time. Keenum likes to throw to slot wide receivers.
How was he doing before he scored that touchdown?
We don't need to focus on this. What we do need to tell our viewers and listeners is which Houston receiver should we be playing in either cash, GPP, or neither. We haven't given any sort of guidance on Will Fuller's big game, on, is Hopkins going to finally show up in a game? John, what do you think?
Nick Hopkins is one of my GPP plays this week. I've been on him the last 2 weeks, so for what it's worth, I've lost the last 2 weeks because of it. But I don't see how you get away from him. They continue to give him opportunity. He's just not gotten into the end zone, and when he does, we've seen a lot of success from him. And Will Fuller is not going to continue to score 3 touchdowns a week like he did last week. So I'll pay the premium here. I'll go with Nuke Hopkins because I think he's a superior talent.
Depends on the site. On FanDuel, he's 6,500, which is way too cheap.
That's fair.
Devin, let me ask you about this one. Kansas City wide receivers. It looks like Watkins is not going to go. Tyreek Hill might be coming back in this game. Any interest in Byron Pringle?
I like Pringles.
Got to pop the Pringles, right?
Interest in Byron Pringle? No.
Right. What about Hill if he's back?
Not really.
John says yes.
Yeah, I'm good with Hill if he's back.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you be interested?
Well, I think
Sammy Watkins. I'm sorry, I asked you a question and cut you off, but with Sammy Watkins looking doubtful at this point, why would you not like Tyreek Hill?
And the question is, and you guys know that I don't play nearly as many GPP lineups as John does. Is he someone who is going to be 100% healthy? That's the question that I ask myself. Are they playing him because they came off of a loss last week and they need a decoy for a majority of the game? That's a real possibility. I'd rather play Travis Kelce, and we'll get to tight ends in a minute. But
Gene Bramall, who's smarter than all of us put together, has been saying that he's coming back this week or even last week for some time. So, I mean, if he tells me that he thinks he's going to be right this week, then that's all I need to hear.
Well, Gene also said that he's been without the brace for a while. He's been running, he's been conditioning. So if it's a contact thing and he's playing, then that part is okay. It's the conditioning part to be able to play every snap is already intact. He's been running for weeks. So that is I'm mangling Gene's words, but that's essentially what he said in his article. So usually when a player comes back from like a knee injury or something, you may worry about conditioning because he hasn't been able to run for weeks. But a shoulder, upper body kind of thing, Tyreek Hill's been in practice for a few weeks. He almost played last week, at least if you believe media reports. So I'm not worried about any kind of limitation on snaps or anything. It's more the thing I'd worry about is Patrick Mahomes' injury, getting the ball deep to Tyreek Hill more so than Tyreek Hill's injury if Tyreek Hill is active.
And pay attention to Dr. Gene Bramall's injury updates throughout the week. It'll really help give you guidance on guys like Tyreek Hill. I think we have to mention a couple other guys before we move on. I'm assuming that because you guys like Jarvis Landry this week, you're fading Odell Beckham Jr. here. Is that a fair assumption?
What's his ownership?
Yeah. Steve says he will be at 14% on DK, and he says, whoa, where is he? And 11 on FanDuel. Under or over that, John?
I will be pretty close to that. I'm not too afraid of the matchup. I think he should see Shaquille Griffin in coverage is my guess.
Yeah.
I think that's probably about right. 10 to 15% is where I would have pegged him, so I'll be near the field.
Yeah, and then we haven't mentioned Michael Thomas. He's usually our plug Michael Thomas into cash lineups. Is this week different on that? Ryan, how do you feel about Michael Thomas?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I mean, I haven't really gone there. I kind of limited my receiver spending to Cooper Kupp at the top just because I don't have enough money to go anywhere else. I'm not saying it's a bad play. It's just he's 1,200 more than last week where he was a lock to play. So it's a little tougher.
Yeah, that's fair.
One thing about Beckham, the Browns there are reports that they're listening to trade offers for Beckham. So that has me off him a little bit.
Wow. I think you can go with Michael Thomas to that point. Jalen Ramsey has given up on his team. His back hurts. I think his back hurts about as much as my back hurts. He just doesn't want to play football anymore.
John, he's listening to his body is what I read today. So
is that what he's doing?
That's what I read today. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to mine as well. It says, "Go to bed, John."
We're just for the listeners. We record this at around 6 p.m. Eastern, which is after John's bedtime. So that's where he's at. No, we actually record around 9:30 p.m. Let's move on to tight ends. Let's go to Devin last. Let's talk to Ryan first on tight ends.
Yeah, this position is just dreadful as well, right? So
disagree.
I mean, it's in the context of salary cap, it's not fun.
There's responsibility.
I mean, Austin Hooper is the guy that I'm looking at. I mean, he sticks out like a sore thumb. 19% of Atlanta targets, which is seventh most among tight ends in the league. Sixth most air yards among tight ends in the league. But $5,000 is not a cheap tight end, and in cash you generally like to pay down at tight end. So it's tough to get him in and feel good about everything else. But I mean, he's probably my number one guy. But other than that, I like Gerald Everett if we are going to spend a little bit down. 3,600 DraftKings, and he was sub 2% earlier when I checked the ownership for Steve. So I think you could play him in any format. Guy's a great athlete. If Cooks is out, that ownership will go up, but so will his snaps and his production. So those are the two guys that I'm looking at primarily. if I am to get a piece of San Francisco, which I do want because that game I think will be super high tempo and potentially high scoring as a result, George Kittle, of course, is the number one piece of San Francisco. His ownership is going to be really high for a tight end, but he is the best piece. He is the known commodity. He is the one you can predict for the most targets. So he's somebody that I'm looking at as well. And he's only 200 more than Austin Hooper, who I kind of made seem like a slam dunk just a minute ago.
John, who are you playing at tight end?
George Kittle is my number one play at tight end for cash and GPP this week. I don't care that he's 22% owned. He's the guy that I'll be jamming in as much as I can. Everything fits there. They've got superior coverage on the outside. The Rams, they can lock down the exterior receivers. And so I think that funnels a lot of action to Kittle, who's already the number one receiver on the 49ers. At 5,200, he's probably, call it $1,000 to $1,500 underpriced if he were a wide receiver. So he's the guy I like the most. And then after that, if I'm for cash games, I'm talking about cash games here. If I'm not paying up for Kittle, I'm almost punting the position as much as I can and going with Noah Fant in Denver against Tennessee. Tennessee, going back to normalized strength of schedule, they're fifth worst against the tight end position this year. And he's a guy they've been trying to integrate into the offense a bit more moving into the season. He's, again, 2,900. I talked earlier about where you're going to find salary relief this week. There's not a whole lot of opportunity there, at least as of Thursday night. So unless we have a whole lot open up tomorrow and Friday practices, you're either going to just build a very, very consistent 5,000 roster across the board for your cash games, or you're going to get a guy like Noah Fant at 2,900 and maybe spend up and try to slam somebody like Pat Mahomes in your quarterback position. So that's the way. Those are the only two people I think are cash game viable. I do like Ryan's call on Hooper. I think it's a great matchup. Arizona, normalized strength of schedule, they are the worst. I think non-normalized strength of schedule, they're the worst as well.
That is true. They gave up 4 DK points to 2 tight ends combined last week, and they're still by 4 points the worst in the league. Yeah, it's bad.
So, I mean, I get it, but I'm looking at talent here and usage in the offense. George Kittle doesn't have to contend with Julio Jones stealing targets from him. So that's why I think that Hooper, is more of a GPP play. And then I want to explain why, but Travis Kelce, I don't have to explain why is GPP viable. And Will Dissly against Cleveland, I think, is still in play at his price point, because I think a lot of people will fade him at $5,000 because of Hooper being right there and Kittle being right there. He's going to go under-owned despite fairly equal upside.
Devin, we're coming to you. I think this is the section where it's your worst pick ever on the power grid. Let's talk.
Yeah. So let me start by saying the good picks. I do like Kittle and cash. I do like Austin Hooper. I do really like Will Dissly. People love to hate Will Dissly ever since he played Arizona, and it seems like the narrative has been he only runs streaks, and that's partially true. But in this offense with Metcalf and Lockett on the outside, you only need to run streaks up the middle, and Russell Wilson's done a pretty good job finding him. Worst pick at 3,300 on DraftKings. This is DraftKings specific, as he's too expensive on FanDuel. Ricky Seals-Jones. So, let me explain.
He's definitely scoring a touchdown this week.
This is not a cash game play. Let me put that real quick.
Duh.
Steve Buzzard has him at less than 0.2% owned, so he doesn't even have him registered. And Ricky Seals-Jones is an athlete, and we've seen this Seattle defense, and Tedrick Thompson might be the worst free safety in football. And they've allowed 33 receptions to tight ends and running backs over the last 3 weeks. So basically 11 per game combined. And Nick Chubb isn't known as a receiver. So how is Cleveland going to move the ball? They're going to try to exploit Tedrick Thompson through the air with Ricky Seals-Jones, who was a 5-star recruit out of high school, played at wide receiver at Texas A&M. And we've seen big catches. He's averaging 24 yards per catch, only 4 receptions on the year. So it is a complete boom or bust. But if he catches a long touchdown pass at 33, you're in pretty good shape. Throw one lineup with it.
One lineup. Okay. Ryan has something to say, and then we'll let the YouTube commenters take care of the rest of eviscerating Devin. What do you got, Ryan?
I wish I knew the week or even the year, but I made literally that same argument for Ricky Seals-Jones 2 years ago or something, and Devin just couldn't get his it wouldn't even let me finish my sentences. So you're welcome for letting you finish your thought on Ricky Seals-Jones, who's being outsnapped by 2x by another backup tight end on his own team. But I get it.
The difference.
The scheme works. I get it. Okay. But
the difference is I basically put a extreme caution that you should only play him in one deep GPP league. I believe somebody can go back and find the tape, but I believe you had said he's cash or a top GPP player.
Well, he was like 2,400 that week. So
I'm not saying I'm playing him in more than one lineup, but I'm playing him in one lineup.
We're talking too much about bad players.
It's getting deep here. These guys are going back and forth, and now Ryan's talking about a tight end being 2,400. I've been playing this game for a long time, and I don't ever remember a tight end being 2,400.
I'm exaggerating. Let's talk about defenses where there are some guys, some teams priced lower than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, John, tell us, you think that there's some lower priced defenses. How are you handling that?
In a week where there's not a whole lot of value, at least, again, as of Thursday night, this is an interesting week, at least on DraftKings, where it looks like they might have changed some things around, going the old school route of Draft Street, where they're starting to drop some questionable defenses, just trying to tempt us. And I have to admit, I'm tempted. I'm tempted by the New York Jets this week against my own Dallas Cowboys at 1,500. Playing at home as an underdog defense, I might roll with them, to be quite honest. The defense I talked about last week, I guess I wish I could remember the fellow's name. Do you guys remember the guy's name who challenged me in the comments section?
I think it was a couple different guys who were like, dude, please give me this bet.
Yeah, I didn't bet you. Whoever you are, and I'm sorry for not remembering your name off the top of my head, but you would have lost, and you would have had to buy your subscription next year. You should be buying it anyhow for what it's worth. But this week, I think the Jets are an interesting team against the Cowboys. It's a highly volatile position. It was a case I made on the YouTube comments last week. I'm not willing to spend a lot of money unless I absolutely love the defense. If you're going to go with, quote, expensive, I think Denver against Tennessee at 3,100 is a defense in cash games I'm willing to spend, quote, up on. But outside of that, I really don't love the position. I'll continue to say this throughout the year. I think if you've got 10 lineups, you should probably have 10 different defenses for all the reasons I've already outlined on this show in the past.
10 different in GPPs, you're saying, like pick a different defense in each line.
Yes. In cash games, just to be clear, it's Denver or the Giants, and that's my list.
Denver or the Jets, and that's your list. Yep, gotcha.
Sorry. Giants, I'm looking at the score of tonight's game as I'm talking. Sorry.
Devin, who you got on defense?
Yeah, the Jets are the top play at 1,500. I don't think it's even remotely – well, I shouldn't say it's remotely closer. Dallas is going to score about 40 on them.
And then that's a DK-specific play. I mean, obviously the pricing doesn't work over on
FanDuel, it's Minnesota at 3,600 at home against Philly. Simply too cheap for how talented that defense is.
Ryan, we usually say pick the team that's playing the Dolphins. You want any piece of the Redskins this week?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to ask John if he liked Washington or Denver better. Obviously, it's Denver, but it's close to me, right? So I don't mind that, but I do think this is certainly not a pay up for defense week. Dallas, Baltimore at the top, both sure they project for a good floor, but with what we've talked about and all the money we need to spend elsewhere, it just doesn't make any sense in cash. So the other one that I actually don't mind here is not quite as cheap as the Jets, but the Jags are 2,200 hosting Teddy Bridgewater, who maybe he feels a little frisky after finally throwing a couple deep balls last week and runs into some errors. But 2,200 for them. GPP only. At a certain point, Arrowhead has to strike, I feel like. So Kansas City in a GPP, Deshaun Watson takes a lot of sacks, hangs onto the ball for a long time. Maybe even Tyreek Hill comes back, has a punt return upside. Who knows? But again, it's a GPP dart with those guys kind of going between the spending up and spending down crowd.
Let's move on to stacks. Devin, who are you stacking this week?
Let's go Gardner Minshew and DJ Chark.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so DJ Chark has been, especially in DraftKings, has been a guy who has shown considerable upside almost each week. At 5,500, he had eight receptions for 164 and 2 last week against really a Panthers defense that had been phenomenal at stopping the pass. So Minshew, I don't know. He's not the most talented guy, but there seems to be some magic surrounding this team that, I mean, look, Blake Bortles was a top 5 or top 10 fantasy quarterback almost every year in Jacksonville. Why can't Gardner Minshew be?
Ryan, where is the magic in your stacked lineups?
2 UCF players mentioned, and my UCF stick is out of reach. Unbelievable. One was Shaquille Griffin, though, who might get burnt in coverage, so maybe I shouldn't hold it up. But so my stacks, I'm all over the Arizona-Atlanta game. I mean, whatever combination you want. Kyler Murray, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, Austin Hooper, Mohamed Sanu, all the guys. Go back to Matt Ryan and just go back and forth. Another one that we didn't quite mention in receivers is Marquise Brown for Baltimore may not play, which if he does not, I like Willie Snead a little bit. Willie Snead's been playing almost all, 2/3 or more, I believe, of the snaps and led or tied with Brown for the lead in wide receiver targets last week. Granted, it was only 5, but they were playing a Pittsburgh team that they didn't really need to open things up against. Rest in peace, Steelers. The other one I like is in Cleveland here. Obviously, when we're in stacks, we're mainly leaning GPP, but Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr.
Jones?
Nope, Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. So Seattle has 3 games out of their 5 where wide receivers were targeted at least 20 times, and they allowed at least 5 catches and 85 yards to one receiver in each. And one of those was the aforementioned almost dead Pittsburgh Steelers offense. And Cleveland targets their wide receivers on over 60% of their pass attempts, which is top 10 in the league. So they probably will target their receivers more than 20 times in the game, and those receivers could have success. So Landry, Cash, Beckham, GPP.
John, who you stacking?
I talked about a couple of these already. Jimmy Garoppolo to George Kittle, kind of chalky, but I like it a lot. I don't know that we mentioned it tonight, but I think that in terms of personnel matchup, I do like Dak Prescott to Amari Cooper this week. That's one that I don't think a lot of people are going to be on. One I do think a lot of people will be on is Jared Goff to Cooper Kupp. And then when we talk about that Kansas City game, Pat Mahomes, you've got 2 main choices, especially if Sammy Watkins is out. They're going to look a lot at Travis Kelce. They're going to look a lot at Tyreek Hill. And I might want to zig where the others zag and go with Byron Pringle or even Demarcus Robinson. We've seen that those types of receivers have 2 touchdown upside already this year. Andy Reid's not afraid to go to a, quote, lesser receiver. And those guys are going to be way under-owned, way underpriced on a week where there's not a whole lot of value to be had. 0 problems going with those guys in GPP formats. And the last thing I'll say about stacking this week, and it kind of echoes what Ryan was just getting at, there are 3 or 4 games that I think you can stack up. Kansas City, Houston looks good. The Rams in San Francisco, Atlanta, Arizona. These are all games where you can stack up 2 wide receivers, a quarterback, and the opposing wide receiver. And I think that's a really successful strategy when we're talking about large field GPPs. And by that, I mean 5-figure entrants. At over 10,000 entries is where you should be thinking about taking that strategy.
Good call. Let's talk about parting thoughts. Ryan, what are your parting thoughts for this evening?
Sure. This week we have a couple of big injury kind of plate tectonics that could shift our way here at about 11:30 Eastern on Sunday. So start thinking now, especially maybe not now, maybe tomorrow afternoon as practice reports come out. Start thinking about what you're going to do if David Johnson isn't going to play, if Tyreek Hill isn't going to play, when Sammy Watkins isn't going to play. So have these things in mind. Don't set it and forget it tonight. By all means, continue to listen to this show throughout the weekend and download it from every device you possibly have, because that helps us. But don't set your lineup and forget it. Have a plan. Injury news will be huge. So make a plan and know what you're going to do so you're not freaking out sweating at like 12:52 Eastern on Sunday morning.
Good call. John, parting thoughts.
I've mentioned a couple times during the show tonight, normalized strength of schedule. Morrow and Austin, this time of year is where this becomes an invaluable tool. Get in there, look at it. It's on the DFS landing page. You should be looking at it and building your lineups according to what you're seeing there, especially in GPP formats. That's where I find it invaluable this time of year.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Devin, bring us home here. What do you got?
Yeah, so if you haven't checked out our new lineup optimizer this year, it's sort of in a spot where it's running pretty efficiently, and there's been a ton of time spent on building it. You can build up to 200 lineups at a time, included in the price of our subscription. So it's footballguys.com, and then the optimizer is right on the DFS homepage.
And I believe you can look at old weeks worth of data if you just want to try the mechanics of it. So you can try that for free, I believe.
Correct.
So give that a shot if you just want to see what it's like. All right, guys. Yeah, like Devin said, check out all our content over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday morning with more thoughts about random cities in the United States and calling out listeners on our YouTube comments. We'll have our Week 7 episode for you. And on behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.